Yeah, Matt, can you tell us a bit about your history, as a veteran, your background, just a little bit about, when you served, where you served, that kind of information, please?
Yeah, no worries. So I completed high school in Coffs Harbour in 1988, and in the January of 1989, I joined up as an apprentice technician in the Australian Air Force for a 3-year apprenticeship, studying radio technologist apprentice. And at the same time, I was at Footscray TAFE in Melbourne, doing an associate diploma in electronics. So the program was a 4-year apprenticeship with 3 years studies. So I ended up doing 3 years studying at Laverton, which was the old RADS base, and going into Footscray a couple of days a week. And then, that was my education to the Air Force. So, going through apprenticeship, you don't get much lower than the low in any defence. And we sort of learned in the early days, you just could keep your head down and, your mouth shut sort of thing, unless you got something you've got that's worth saying, just keep it to yourself type thing. And so that was the 3 years I did there. And then I ended up getting posted to Williamtown, which I ended up at the operational flight training in the F-18 flight simulator in Williamtown. And, when you're going as an apprentice, you find out where you're going to get posted. And we did these tours, around the bases as an apprentice, and you go and see the different sections and where you could work in either air or ground services. And I said, I want to work in the simulator, and they said, get stuff. There's no chance you're going to get that. No way. And when it come time to put your name down, I said, I'm going to put down the full flight simulator, the flight simulator, and they get, don't waste it. If you put it down, you're just wasting a posting. And I went, oh fuck, all right, well, I put something else down. And the guys were shining on me, so I didn't even put it down. And when the posting cycle came out, I got it. Just fucking bizarre, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up being posted to Williamtown, and I was there for 5 years on the simulator for the F-18, and that was amazing. Just sitting up in the instructor operating console, and basically I was, it's like playing God. You got fighter pilots in the cockpit, and I'm sending, aircraft into them. I'm firing SAMs from the ground and doing all sorts of sorties with the pilots, as well as maintaining the equipment. I was like, so you had that sort of both sides of it. And then,
what was the technology like back then? Compared to, I guess, a modern simulator, or was it still, did it have gyros and it would sort of move and that kind of thing? Or?
No, in those days they didn't have that, because fighting aircraft, it's doing loops and barrel rolls and all sorts of stuff. So it just can't cope with that. So they did everything visually. So you sat in the cockpit, and then when they were really serious about their training, they'd suit up in an air suit. So the suit would, inflate and deflate to give you those G-force feelings. Yeah. And then the visual orientation, the 3 screens of the visual, and that give you that sensation of depth and depth of field, so you could land and take off and dogfight essentially with other aircraft in the air. And that's where, that my introduction to simulation came about. And after that, it was sort of like I went into and become a sergeant in a avionics systems technician, and I got posted up to Tyndall. Yeah. And it's in 75 Squadron up there. And that was amazing in itself, that you're really out in the boondocks out there. And I only lasted there for about 6 months. And as soon as I did that Systex training course, but they needed somebody in Richmond at 33 Squadron in the air-to-air refueling. So I ended up as an avionics systems tech doing modifications and rectifications on 707 aircraft. And it was that time there. I spent, about 3 or 4 years there, but it was that's when I was deployed, and that was deployed in 1998. And that was the first time the 33 Squadron was deployed in an active role, and we ended up in Kuwait.
Can you tell us a little bit about that deployment and, what your memories are of that? What year was the deployment to Kuwait?
Yeah, that was in March of 98.
98,
It was a 3-month deployment. We took over one aircraft. I went across on the first aircraft. I was one of the senior avionics guys. So we were in short supply, the avionics guys. So some of them, the black-handers, engines, framies, they sort of rotated out after a month or 6 to 8 weeks. The next aircraft rolled in, but I got to sit there for the whole 3 months with a few other guys. But it was a very, very interesting time being deployed, because obviously, not a lot of people in the Air Force get deployed in active roles. So, and going through that whole process was really enlightening. And because I've been in the Air Force by that stage, 7 years or so, and it was after that deployment that I decided that my time in the Air Force is limited. And it wasn't so much about the Air Force; it was about the Defence Force and the way we were treated going into an active service role. Pretty much in the dark, the whole thing, and all we were given when we jumped on the aircraft was a mask and some pens in case there was some gas attacks, because that was the primary concern. Right. Saddam Hussein was building chemical weapons, and they were going in there to find them. With the UN peacekeepers were going in, but he was pushing back, and that's how we ended up being deployed. As part of that force to encourage him to let the peacekeepers in and do all the inspections. So when we jumped, before we even get to deployed, and we're in that early stages and like it happened on a Monday and like Wednesday we were gone type thing. That's how fast that was. Right. When we found out that we were going. One of the things was we had to go and get all these vaccinations, right? And I had to sign on this dotted line to say, and I got stuff like plague, Black Death, every type of vaccination that you could possibly think of.
Like you actually get told what they were. I just got stabbed in the arm. I didn't even get told what it was for.
Yeah, we got told, and then we had to sign this form to say, if anything goes wrong and you have a reaction, you're not going to come back and sue the Air Force. And I went, what?
That's typical military, I think.
I just went, you're fucking kidding, right? Like if I have a seizure or something like that, we'll help you. I went, that's very kind of you. You're going to do that. And I said, well, what if I don't want it? He says, well, you don't go.
Right.
And I went, well, that's not an option, right? Because you joined the Defence Force. This is the calling. This is what you do. So
you want to do your job. You want to actually do it in real time, don't you?
Real time, and that was real time. We're right at that, at that sort of service level, sending up aircraft to support fighter aircraft.
Yeah.
So it all kicked off. We were in, critical for refueling operations, and not just for Australia, for, the whole international force, the coalition that was over there. So we were dealing with the US, Canadians, Brits, refueling all types of aircraft.
Did you have a ground role, or was it a air crew role? Your position?
It was an air crew role.
Right.
But we were supporting the aircraft. So the aircraft would go out on sorties every day. A couple of sorties every day, and they'd go out and they'd just do the high level altitude flying and refueling of fighter aircraft that were patrolling the whole region.
Yeah.
So and it was real, and I was part of the avionics side, so there's a bit of secret squirrel sort of stuff going on my side of it, as well as maintaining the aircraft avionically and doing normal routine servicings. And we didn't have hangars, so we're at Kuwaiti, the Kuwait International Airport.
Right.
Ground zero, if it ever kicked off and it went ballistic, that was the first place that was going to go.
Yeah.
Because, we had our aircraft, the Canadians and the Yanks were there as well. So there was a lot of, high value assets sitting on target, on the tarmac. And so we were doing routine maintenance on those aircraft. If we had an engine change because an engine failed or was damaged, we're changing it on the tarmac.
Open, yeah.
in the open. And yeah, we went through all sorts of weather conditions over there, super hot.
Oh,
And it wasn't even like at that stage, we're in the Middle East. I didn't realize what summer was like, but we were there in March, April, and May. And by the end of May, mate, it was fucking going off in
oh
Kuwait.
no, I think one of the most wicked sandstorms I've ever been in is in Kuwait, where, you're walking along and you can't even see yourself, you got your hands in front of your face, you can't see them. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, we were doing maintenance on an aircraft at night, and because we had all the, you got your gas mask and you got everything, and you got your sand goggles and all that sort of stuff, and then we're just sort of noticing, oh, there's a wind kicking off, right? So it's getting a bit windy, and then all of a sudden, in the distance, the lights all started going out, right? There's like as if there was like power cuts.
Yes,
And
yeah.
it was a sandstorm, and we had to just scramble to lock up. We were, doing servicing on 2 aircraft, so we had engine cowls open, bay doors open. It was like a full tilt servicing, and we just had to shut everything up, and everyone just scrambled into the aircraft and just shut the door.
Yeah.
And we had aircraft parked side by side like you would at any sort of terminal. Couldn't see the aircraft, and we're all sitting in the cockpit going, "Fuck, this is real," like. And basically, the aircraft, all the engines full of sand, that sort of stuff. But just sort of, we sort of cleaned out as much as possible, then start them up, and it all just blew out, and away you go.
I got a funny story for you, John, actually. When I was transiting through Kuwait, this base, the American base there, which is huge. It's almost like the size of Melbourne. It's that big. But one of the days we were lucky enough to get on a bus, and we went out to the US Air Force officers' mess, and they had a pool there. So you just come in and out of country, out of Iraq, out of the war zone, straight to the RAAF officers' mess, and they had a beautiful swimming pool. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I was even more impressed that when you sat down at lunch, you actually got knives and forks that were made of silver instead of plastic. So that was you Air Force guys, you do it pretty tough. So
we went to because when you get deployed, the Air Force, we check in. You guys sort of you need to go and report. We go and check in at the hotel type thing.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, we sleep. This is the old army. This is that that competitive thing that we always have between the corps. But yeah, we sleep under the stars, and you only sleep, if there's 5 stars.
And that's the thing where they put us. They put us in this the Safa Hotel or whatever it is at Kuwait Airport, right? And it's still there. It's still like I think it's a 4-star, 3 or 4-star hotel, right? So, but I tell you what, after 3 months of living there and living in the bunker, I didn't really feel that safe. You're a sitting duck.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. That's comfort, that's for sure.
I can't even complain about hard living. You got to listen to John's stories about Angola.
No, that was pretty easy.
Yeah.
There were no sandstorms.
Yeah.
No sandstorm. Yeah. Sandstorms and heat. That's what I got out of Kuwait. And then doing, the gas mask training in the heat, and carrying people, dead weights over the sand dunes, that sort of stuff, just to keep you sharp, keep you honest.
Matt, in terms of your day, how long were you flying? So you said you were in support aircraft.
So I was on the ground.
Can you describe a day? What was a day for us?
Yeah, it was basically we were on 24-hour operations effectively, and whenever the coalition aircraft were flying, our guys were up there if they were needed to do that, the air-to-air refueling. So I think we ran, from memory, I think it was 80 more than 80 missions up there, and with 100%. So we had a full of 100% show rate on site. So even when we had aircraft fail, we're doing engine changes within hours, something that would take 24 hours. We were punching them out within 6 to 8 hours. It was all hands on deck sort of thing to do them and to get the aircraft back up and running. So it was a pretty good effort by the team that went over there, and the air crews as well.
And then you came back from Kuwait, and what was your journey after that in defence, or, you know, as you transitioned to your civilian life?
Yeah, so I went, part of the thing around 707s was back in the early 80s, there was a 707 aircraft that crashed off Presale. And from that, there was basically a determination that the Air Force didn't have a proper training to be able to train their air crew, you know, with engine failures and that sort of stuff. They had a pretty old simulator that was based in Qantas, and they ended up commissioning a full flight simulator for 707. So by the time when that arrived, in around, I think that was in 1999, I think it was, that arrived at Richmond. And because I'd had previous simulator experience and was working on the 707 aircraft and in avionics, I was sort of in the box seat to go and step straight into that role. So I actually went into reserves, the Air Force Reserves, and walked across the road from the hangar into another building. And now I was, you know, helping to install and maintain the 707 full flight simulator. So the same air crews that we were working with in Kuwait and that we were, you know, sending off from exercises around Australia were coming in, and now we were, you know, putting them through their paces in an actual full flight simulator, which was pretty cool. So that's that sort of thing. So, and I was doing that. That was my job. Effectively, I switched out and I was ended up working for CAE, which is a Canadian aviation electronics company who build simulators all over the world. And so I'd work there either a day shift or a night shift, and then on the opposite cycle, I'd go and do reserve work, and I'd be doing independent inspections on engines after they were being changed. So, you know, you have to do the avionics, and you need an independent inspector, and I had my rating, so, and they were short of guys. So I'd be coming back as a reservist and going and doing that on my when I wasn't working one job, I was working the other.
And then how long were you doing that for, Matt?
I did that for about 18 months, all up. And then I ended up, again, because of my time in the Middle East, it sort of triggered that, you know, what else is out there? And I got in contact with a colleague through Qantas, and who was working with me in Richmond at the 707 simulator. And the guy said, oh, they're looking for, you know, flight simulator engineers for Emirates Airline, right. In Dubai. And everyone said, oh, fuck, I wouldn't want to go over there. You know, you wouldn't want to go over there, Matt. You've already been over there. And everyone, and the email just sort of like in those days, it was the email. You don't see much of those, but sitting on the coffee table at lunchtime and everyone else left, and I looked at it and went, I might have a crack at that. And I just walked out with it. And I, you know, emailed the guy and said, look, this is me. That's what I want to do. And they said, yeah. And I think it was 8 weeks later, I was in Dubai.
And how long were you there for?
15 and a half years.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I walked over there, and I think they brought in their third simulator at that stage.
Right.
And, you know, when I left 15 and a half years later, you know, we had three buildings full, you know, running around, I think it was around 12 simulators or something like that. And it might even be more. I've lost count, you know, and was on, you know, countless installations, maintaining, and, you know, between 7.0s, Hercs, Bell helicopters, G4s, G5s, 737s, A380s, 330s, 340s, you know, all those different commercial aircraft was, you know, that's where I spent my time. I was basically a really well-employed computer game specialist.
And the big question that the whole audience wants to know is, if the pilot goes down, can you land a plane for us?
Yeah, easy peasy.
Easy, yeah, with all that experience.
They get paid a lot of money. It's not that hard.
No, not that hard. There's just a few buttons you press, isn't there? So
It is, yeah. But hats off to the pilots as well, because they get put through their paces and
yeah,
engine failures, avionics failures, all sorts of failures, and they've got to try and bring it in. And that's like some of the pilots just absolutely hate the flight simulators. It's like the worst time. And if they do it badly or they don't perform, they risk their job, sort of thing. So the machines are first class, hour for hour as flying the real aircraft. So, they're